You are listening to Book Clips, a mini podcast in which authors or narrators do readings from novels. Check out the show notes for the synopsis and buy links for this book.
This is a recording of In Your Words, a short story by R.J. Samuel. She was reading my book, and the expression on her face suggested she was finding something hard to swallow. I waited by the armchair and considered whether to help or not. I lowered myself onto the plump cushions and decided to wait until she looked up. She could ask me then, if she wanted. I felt the drudge of the last few days of travelling seep out into the soft depths of the cushions. I closed my eyes. I would talk to her in just a minute, if she wanted. I could not keep my eyes closed. I opened them and watched her. Her blue eyes flickered over my words, her face a backdrop to the stark design of feathers on the book cover, and to my black and white face in miniature that covered her cheek. She was delicate in the strength of her features, laughter lines that pointed to the ground. She was wearing a masculine shirt in a very feminine way, the swell of breasts visible behind her folded arms, behind the hands that cupped my book. I looked back up, and she was staring right into my eyes from a few feet away, thumbs holding her place in the closed book as her eyes moved from the face in front of her to the colourless stamp of the authorship that smiled from under her fingers. I smiled. Might as well speed up the recognition, and it came like a train roaring past the crossing guard. I could see her pupils dilate, and I crept into those pools of sunlit blue, hoping to drown in the depths of their black centres. She glanced back down at the public me, the confident, straight-jawed me, with the looks that shouted, "I am an author." They had posed me well. I wondered if the reality lived up to that image. My hair was shorter now, easier to manage in hotel rooms. My eyes bore less hope as I watched people swallow a message that I now found hard to believe. She was smiling, the book lowered onto her lap. The smile was shy, but it transformed her face into a blaze of heat that sizzled through my heart. I felt the crackling in my chest with a mild sense of surprise. She was the fan, was she not? On page 40, you say that love exists to bond two people together in such a burning fury of emotion that they don't notice the tedium of their everyday existence. I frowned as I tried to remember if I knew where I had put that in the book. She laughed, and the sound was like a soft hand holding my heart. "I'm sorry, yes, it's here. You obviously wouldn't remember the exact page. It's just that I was reading that and wondering whether you really believed that, and the next thing I look up and you're there. I'm sorry. I just blurt out things sometimes as I think them. You probably escaped here for some peace and quiet. The last thing you want is some reader bothering you with questions." I looked around at the oasis I had found in the noisy cathedral of books. There were a few empty armchairs beside the two we occupied. Coffee tables with piles of books pulled out of their regular lines on the shelves, strewn over the tabletops. A Starbucks coffee cup nestled between the stack of books nearest to her. "I don't mind. You've taken the time to read what I've written. The least I can do is explain what I obviously haven't been able to in the book." I didn't mean to sound petty or like a jerk, even though that was exactly what I felt when I saw her eyes. I cursed my twisted tongue. She wasn't responsible for my insecurities, my lost beliefs, my anger. I shook my head and said, "I'm so sorry, that sounded awful." She nodded. Then the smile reappeared, and I felt the rain clouds evaporate. "I wasn't actually asking you to explain it. I understood what you meant. What I was asking is if you believe that." "Do I believe that love is just a distraction?" She nodded, and I sat back. I worried at how slow my answer was in coming. "Yes, I do, but I also believe that it can happen in an instant, and it can change your life so dramatically that you don't care anymore about the tedium of your everyday, because it does not exist anymore. There is never any tedium in your everyday when you find that love." She looked puzzled. "That's not in your book. You haven't got to that part yet." She laughed. "Or you just thought of it and you're going to put that in your next book." "I've read this one a few times, and I know it doesn't say that anywhere." I had to smile, for so many reasons, but the biggest one at that particular moment was her. And the fact that a woman who could melt my heart with her smile had read my words and connected with them, had thought enough of them to read them again and again. She looked slightly dazed. I looked at her fingers. She wore no rings. "Can I get you a coffee? It's the least I can do considering you just gave me the idea for my next book." Her hands fluttered over the cover, and I felt my breath catch to see her fingers stroke my face as she closed my book. "Thank you, but I have to go." She looked at her watch, and I saw another line show up to join the laughter lines, one that was not as happy as its neighbours. She said, her voice low in the high cathedral, "My girlfriend will be home in a few minutes. I'd better get back." Her movements were clumsy as she collected her cup and the book and a rucksack from the ground beside her armchair. I got up as well. We were the same height, her brown curls giving her an extra half-inch of air. I said, At least let me sign the book. It might make it more valuable some day. I laughed and hoped that my bitterness did not taint the sound. She searched in her rucksack, and I pulled out the pen I had been using for the book signing downstairs. Lots of ink left in it anyway. Though it was just Monday, I had a week of watching the other more established authors interacting with their readers. She handed me my book, and I opened it to the front page. I found my fingers strangely immobile. No words came to my scrambling mind. My voice squeaked a little as I asked, and I couldn't work out the grammar. Who should I make it out to? I looked up and found that at this range her eyes were patterned crystals of blue. I held my breath and braced myself, and there it was, her smile. Though nervous, it was brilliant. Bella, just make it out to Bella. How appropriate. I realized I had spoken those words aloud and hastened to cover my blush. I'm Amelia. We both looked down at the book and at my name in large font, and my blush deepened, as did her smile, which I could see from the corners of my eyes. She chuckled, but must have taken pity on me because she said nothing, and I could find no words. Not wanting to scribble the first and only words that would come to my mind, I closed the book and handed it back to her. I'll sign it on my last day here, on Friday. She didn't meet my eyes as she popped the book into her rucksack. I really should go. Karen doesn't like it if I'm not there when she gets home. She hefted the rucksack onto her shoulder, and a pinned pink badge wobbled on the army green. Some of us have no choice but to live the tedium of our everyday. She was gone before I could say any more. Her absence was a horrifyingly painful breath that didn't seem to end. I rubbed my chest and stood for a moment, wondering how a stranger could elicit such pain with her absence, when an hour ago all that there was of her to me was absence. Well, you might have just proven your beliefs to yourself. The thought was strangely comforting, the return of an old friend, a blanket warming the cold disbelief around my heart. I returned to my station downstairs and placed a smile on my face as I waited to find even more words to scrawl for my readers. The smile seemed to flow easier onto my face, and soon it drew people to the table, and the rest of the evening passed much faster than the morning. Her armchair was empty, and I checked my watch. I had not wanted to risk missing a moment with her, so I had been checking every half hour. It was now almost noon. I wondered whether she came to the same spot every day, how long she spent here, in this oasis of calm, of words. I started to doubt. Maybe she had to wait for the girlfriend to leave. Maybe the girlfriend didn't work on Tuesdays. I watched the clock on the wall, the black line of the second hand as it jogged around the white face. She had a cup of coffee in each hand, and her smile was even shyer than yesterday's as she offered me one. I took it with a smile of thanks and sipped. How did you know how I took it? You'd be surprised what your publicist put up on your website. Ah, I see. So you visited my website last night? She settled into her armchair and sighed. Aren't these chairs just so wonderfully comfortable? I would sleep here if they'd let me. She wore a blue shirt today, and it deepened the shade of her eyes. The sun through the glass roof highlighted the streaks in the auburn of her curls. Would your girlfriend not mind if you slept here, if they let you? I lowered myself into my armchair. Well, she would certainly notice, and she would definitely mind. Her voice was sad. Isn't that a good thing, to have someone notice and care about your absence? She nodded, but the movement was weak. Is there anyone that waits for your return home? She had her eyes fixed on her hands. No, I'm not that lucky. Besides, I've been throwing myself into book tours and basically traveling for what seems like a lifetime. But it's only been a year. The hotel rooms make it feel like a long time. She looked up. So are you not writing, or are hotel rooms conducive to writing? I shook my head. They are not great places to write the kind of material I used to write about, love and home and belonging. Funny that marketing those words takes time away from living them. She pulled her feet up under her and curled deeper into the cushions. I had wanted to ask her everything about her life, about the laughter lines that seemed to have lost their readiness, about the sadness that shaded the blue sun of her eyes. But we ended up talking about me, and the day flew by, until she noticed the clock on the wall and hurriedly uncurled herself. I really have to go. Goodness, it's late. Her movements were awkward again, not full of the grace of her all afternoon. She was gone in minutes, taking the scent of freshness with her. For most of Wednesday, Bella read and I sat and watched the play of light through her hair, the ascent and descent of her eyelashes, the ripple of her throat as she thought, the caress of her fingers as they turned over the pages. The chatter of the shoppers faded under the rustle of pages, the tap of her cup against the wood, the sigh of the cushion as she eased further into its embrace. She would look up every few minutes as if to check that I was still there. She seemed to sense that I did not want to talk that day, but the silence was filled with words that danced between our eyes, taking their time, a slow waltz today. She tried to clear my empty coffee cup as she left, a movement of habit, but I shook my head. She smiled and her steps were slow as she left our space. I watched her leave the bookstore from my perch on the second floor, and I could see her pace quicken as she crossed the large circular foyer, her arms pushing against the rigid revolving doors. On Thursday she talked. She told me about her life with Karen, the uncertainty she felt in her skin, in her trembling muscles. She knew Karen loved her, but she felt like a possession, a trophy placed on the mantelpiece of their life. I could not ask the question that was much more important to me than whether Karen loved her. The question I wanted the answer to was whether she loved Karen, but I found the question sticking in the dark prison of my throat, and it never emerged into the sun. So the topic changed to her past, to her, and I drank in every detail of this woman, clinging greedily to them like I was storing them away to take out and examine in the tedium of my everyday, because I knew that that was what my life would be now that I had found her, and now that I would have to leave her. Friday dawned and noon arrived before I was ready. I was slightly later than I had been before. Her eyes widened when she saw me, and it looked like relief washed across them for a brief moment. Her eyes opened even wider when she saw the chocolate muffins I carried. Her smile and the careful pleasure she took in every bite was worth the harried search for the best bakery in a city I didn't know. It took a lot of resolve not to cross the few feet between our armchairs and stroke the chocolate off her chin. Instead, I pointed at my chin. She laughed and said, "Can't take you anywhere. You've got chocolate all over your chin." She got up and took a napkin from the little pile I'd left on the table in front of her chair. She walked over to me, and I felt my heart thud in time with each step. She knelt in front of my chair, her eyes level with mine, her hands betraying the slightest of tremors as she wiped the chocolate from my chin. Her eyes wore the glaze of the sun on the sea, and I could see the black circles swell as she murmured, "Your eyes are the same colour as the chocolate." My eyes dropped to her lips as she spoke, and all I could think of was cherries. Cherries and chocolate. Did they go together? They seemed to. The smear of chocolate lay just beside her lips, and before I could think, I felt my face brushed by her hand with the napkin mid-stroke, and I felt my lips touch the velvet of chocolate on skin, and I felt my lips move over hers, and I felt the breath she released in a moan that came to rest gently against mine. The kiss was sweet and slow and long, yet too short before she yanked her head back. The dazed look in her eyes changed to panic. "Bella, don't go." The words escaped my bruised lips. She shook her head and rested her hands on the arms of the chair as she pushed herself upright. "Bella, I leave tonight. Come with me." I spoke as she gathered her things, her eyes not looking at me. She was gone before I saw that her copy of my book lay on the cushion of her empty armchair. I waited until I could wait no more, or I would miss my flight. I sat in my armchair and willed her back, but her chair remained empty, my book forlorn. I picked up the book and turned to the front page. I found my pen and wrote what I could through the gap tearing its way through me. She would have a signed copy to take home for her mantelpiece when she came in tomorrow. If she came in, I thought probably not. Karen did not work weekends. I packed my bag, saying goodbye to yet another hotel room. The ride to the airport was longer than I could have imagined, longer than I remembered, lonelier than even the lonely ride into an unknown city a few days before. The airport was thronged with holidaymakers. I kept my head down as I pushed my way through the gaiety. I checked in for my flight, checking what city I was leaving. This time I needed to know its name. It seemed like the most important place on earth, and the place to which I would never return. I stared through the glass out onto the tarmac and blamed the glare of the sun for the wetness in my eyes. I could feel the hardness of disbelief crawl back into view and stake its claim again on my heart. "Has anyone told you that you shouldn't believe in love at first sight?" Her voice was soft beside my ear. I closed my eyes. She added, leaning closer, "Unless the other person falls as well." I opened my eyes and looked at Bella. The sun shone off her smile, and I felt the disbelief scream in anger as it stalked off to find a new heart to stake out. She said, "You can't leave this lying around in a bookstore with your address written on it. Someone could have found it and arrived at your door." She opened the book and read my handwritten words out loud. "I now believe in love at first sight. Come with me, and let us prove love can make us forget the tedium of our everyday." She smiled tenderly. "Somehow I don't think there will ever be any tedium in my everyday with you." The end. This has been In Your Words by R.J. Samuel. If you enjoyed this short story, you may enjoy my 4 novels which you can find on Amazon. The novels in order of publication are Heartstopper, Falling Colours, Casting Shadows, and A Place Somewhere. You can find out about me on www.rjsamuel.com. Thank you for listening.
You have been listening to Book Clips. Check out the show notes for the synopsis and buy links for this book. If you are interested in showcasing your novel, then check out the show notes for more information.